everyone. Welcome to the Becoming Anchored podcast. I am Laura Deneen, your host for today, and we have the lovely Katherine Fowler as well. So Katherine is a dietitian in the Nashville area, and we have shared many clients over the years, and Katherine is just so lovely. And Katherine, you were actually our first guest on this podcast, so welcome.
Thank you, Laura. I am so honored to be here and just to be invited to take part in this podcast. Thank you for having me.
Of course. So Lauren Jackson isn't with us today. It'll be me and Katherine. But yeah, we're so excited to have Katherine. And so if you're new to this podcast, the purpose of this podcast is really just to share life with you all. And so, you know, Lauren and I talk about this a lot, but we're first and foremost humans, and we want to be relatable, and we want to share our lived experiences. So the ups and downs of life and the hardships that life brings, along with the joy. So we're here to do that with you. And then we also have the benefit of, you know, being a therapist. And so we're going to share some of our nuggets and wisdom that we have learned as therapists over the years. A quick caveat, this is not designed to be therapy. Yes, we are therapists by trade, but if you are needing extra support, if you're in the Tennessee area, we would love to see you at Anchored. And then Katherine is also going to be sharing more about her practice as well. So we're excited to hear about her openings. But yeah, if you need professional support and you're in Tennessee, we would love to see you. If you're out of state, please find a professional in your area. So thanks for being here today. Okay, so when Katherine and I were trying to decide what topic to choose, there's so many that I feel that you are just an expert in, Katherine. And so narrowing down to one topic is hard. And Katherine and I are colleagues and friends, and I feel like we could talk about so many things all day long. So narrowing down to one topic was quite difficult. So I'm sure that we'll have you back on the show down the road as well. But today we decided to talk about supporting families who have a loved one going through eating disorder recovery. So I think sometimes we think of children, which we're going to be talking about children, adolescents, but this can also be maybe you're a parent and you're supporting an adult child in eating disorder recovery, or maybe you're supporting your husband or your wife in eating disorder recovery. And the nuances of that, I think Katherine does so well. And so yeah, that's going to be our topic for today. And so we're excited to dive in. So Katherine, just out of curiosity, tell us a little bit more about yourself and your style as a nutrition therapist, the work that you do first, so that our audience kind of knows about you if they don't know you yet, and then we can kind of dig into the topic a little bit more.
Yeah, absolutely, Laura. So as you mentioned, I'm a dietitian and own a group practice in Nashville, Tennessee, an outpatient nutrition therapy practice that specializes in treating eating disorders, body image concerns, and family feeding dynamics. Our practice serves all ages, all genders, again, with those specialty areas. So I've been practicing as a dietitian for just about 15 years, really working in the field of treating eating disorders. I'm a certified eating disorder a certified eating disorder specialist consultant through IADEP, and along with working in direct client care, I'm able to provide supervision to other professionals that are seeking the certified eating disorder specialist credential as well.
Amazing. Yeah. Yes. So you have wonderful experience working with this population. Yeah. So one thing that I have found as I have gone through my career is, first of all, that we don't get much training, especially as therapists in eating disorders, and learning the nuances of treating eating disorders or supporting loved ones of clients that are going through eating disorder recovery. A lot of that training that I've received has been through supervision from supervisors like you who've really poured into me. And one of the things that I find is the hardest parts of going through recovery is that families come to us and they don't know how to support their loved one in recovery. And so by the time people get to us, their loved one might be quite sick. And I don't mean that in a critical way, but sometimes people were able to catch the disordered eating before it turns into an eating disorder. So in the therapy world, we would think about that from a subclinical standpoint, right? And then sometimes by the time that people reach out, they're in the throes and they're in the thick of it. And then their loved ones are coming to us and they're really afraid and they're really, they feel really anxious about the treatment and how long it's going to take and do people actually get better? And so I'm sure you've seen those things in your office too, right, Katherine?
Yeah, definitely. Any individual that is walking alongside a loved one, embarking on this treatment process, it's understandable that it's really scary. There's a lot of unknowns. There's just a lot of, outcomes that can't be predicted. And yeah, that's understandable. And I think, for individuals supporting someone in their life going through this process, the initial best steps that they can take is ensure that their loved one has a team of professionals that really has experience in this area, and that they are supported by clinicians that can really walk alongside them in that process, provide that education, that reassurance, that support, connect them with resources as well, because it really does take a village. And, loved ones and families, they can be one of the greatest assets in an individual's recovery process. So, I think it's wonderful when there are clinicians that are able to come together, collaborate, work as a team, and supporting a whole family system through this process.
Absolutely. Yeah. And I think oftentimes families come to us and they feel blamed or shamed for their loved one's eating disorder. And I'm not here to say that parents or loved ones do everything right, in air quotations, right? Like, we all have room to grow and learn. But I think blaming and shaming is really not looking at the full picture, right? And so there are cases where maybe a parent has messed up or maybe been entrenched in diet culture, but I really love to hold hope as a therapist that we can all grow and learn and change. And so, yeah, like you talked about, we have to be willing as providers to maybe, I don't know if, confront isn't the right word, but to share directly our thoughts, our opinions, even if that means that, it counters some of the family's beliefs about body or beliefs about food or beliefs about exercise. And that's one of the things that has helped me the most as a provider, is just really stepping into a place of assertiveness, but remembering that it's all from love and loving care for a family. And really resisting the urge to blame, to criticize, to shame, because that's not helpful. We're all trying to, fight the eating disorder together, and keeping that in mind has been really helpful as a professional for me.
Yes, that makes sense, Laura. Totally. And, I think for just about all people living in this day and time, we're all immersed in diet culture, right? We're all conditioned to a degree to really buy into that. And these messages that have been just we're inundated with, that we've been shaped by, that's a reality, right? That's real. And family members, they know what they know, and they don't know what they don't know, right? And I've never encountered, a family member or support person that doesn't want the best for their loved one, right? They're doing what they think is going to be most helpful. And sometimes they're needing some more information, right? Or psychoeducation around how to best do that. Because certainly an individual dealing with an eating disorder, that's tough to navigate, right? Like, how do we know what to say? We don't want to say the wrong thing, but we don't want to say nothing. And we're just feeling lost. And, the next steps to take on what's really going to be best for our loved one. And the same, intervention, so to speak, is not going to be appropriate for everybody.
For everyone. Yeah. And I actually lead a free support group and it's not a therapy group, right? So it's open nationwide, and we've had some people from different states join, and Yeah, I think that was something I actually shared recently with a family member, was just this idea that, no two eating disorders are the same, and so no two treatment plans are the same as well. And providing that psychoeducation like you talked about, I think is one of the fundamental pieces of supporting families that are walking alongside someone with an eating disorder. So equipping the family to understand what is happening for their loved one, right? So this is, and Carolyn Costin talks about this, but it's like, it is about the food and it's also not about the food, and we have to address both from the therapy side and the dietitian side. And we're kind of tag teaming it. And I tell clients this, that some of our work, especially more so in the beginning, overlaps, right? And they might hear something similar from you and something similar from me. And we're certainly staying in our lane, so to speak, and scope of practice, but it's reinforcing kind of that same message. And so I found that psychoeducation, especially for family members, is one of the best things we can do in the earlier stages of treatment. It's almost, I kind of think of myself as more so as a teacher in those moments of like, hey, let me teach you about what an eating disorder is, where we're going in treatment, and then how we can get there. And I'm just thinking about myself, like, if I have a mental health diagnosis, I would want to know those things, right? I would want to know what's happening to me. And I have had various diagnoses over the years that I've talked about on the show. And that has been the best treatment for me, is to understand what's happening to me, where we're going, and then how I can get there.
Yeah, having those expectations set, Laura. And of course, none of us have a crystal ball, and we can't predict exactly what an individual's recovery journey is going to look like. But, we can share, hey, in our clinical experience, right? Like, this is what we've seen. This is what we can expect. This is what we can predict. And of course, your treatment team is there to walk alongside you as things shift and as maybe the treatment plan changes, right? And can be a guide of sorts, right, to navigate, because this is complicated. Life is complicated. We're talking about people that have jobs, they have other children, maybe they have spouses, they're in higher education, right? And treatment takes a lot of time, a lot of resources, a lot of energy, and it can be complicated to really get that treatment plan or that approach set in motion that's going to align with that individual's needs.
Absolutely. Yeah, it's complicated, it's messy, it's hard. We're in the trenches for a while, especially with anyone with an eating disorder. And then I know the family too is in the trenches with us. And I think it's this tricky dynamic of, telling a family, hey, this is what we need to do. And there's also hope, and holding both of those together as providers, I found can sometimes be tricky, where we definitely want to instill, hey, this is really serious, and people do get better, right? So the fundamental of like psychoeducation, I'm curious from your perspective in the dietitian world, what else do you feel are fundamentals to treating, as you're working with a family with an eating disorder, what are you keeping in mind?
Yeah, well, again, it's going to be individualized, right? And, in our practice, we make a point for that initial appointment. It's a long appointment, it's an hour and a half long, where we're really getting an opportunity to hear the story of what's going on, all of the complexities and nuance to those circumstances for that individual. And getting a sense of, okay, where are we, right? Like, what type of treatment, what level of support is going to be indicated for this individual to reach recovery and get their needs met. And I would say, it can be a common misconception that there's a misunderstanding about like what nourishment means, and if a person is nourished or not nourished. I think a lot of what we learn in our culture tells us you can just look at somebody and just tell, like, oh, if they look okay, then they must be okay. But I would say almost always, not always, but almost always, when an individual is in the throes of an eating disorder, there is some degree of low nutrition, malnutrition going on, where their brain is hijacked. And it is a priority in nutrition therapy to really ensure that that brain is rescued and that that individual is getting the nourishment they require and they need to not only stabilize from a medical standpoint, if that's indicated, but also so they are able to think more clearly, right? And engage in their therapy work, for their medications that they may be taking that are indicated for them to work effectively. So that I think that's so important, to reinforce that may not be understood by either the individual going through the process themselves or their support people in their life, that really is priority number one.
Absolutely. Yeah. And that I loved that word you used, the misconception, right? And again, without blaming families, but oftentimes families will come to me after they've seen you and they'll say like, Laura, Katherine wants us to eat this much, right? And I think that's a pretty common thread, right? That clients are given a meal plan and they look at the meal plan and their initial response is like, and not every client, right? Just to put a caveat there, but their initial response is like, oh my goodness, I have permission to eat this much food. So it's either permission or it's, this amount of food scares me. And I think there are a lot of myths around what our bodies actually need in any given day. And I remember when you did a training for our practice maybe 2 years ago, and you talked about the need for nutritional rehabilitation for almost all, if not every client with an eating disorder. And that just really stuck out in my mind of like, yes, every client that has an eating disorder, no matter what their presentation or diagnosis is, needs nutritional rehabilitation. And with that comes psychoeducation for the family around what an appropriate amount of food is in any given day.
Yeah, I mean, we've got to think about, an eating disorder as an injury of sorts, right? Where, with the evidence we have to this point, like the brain is impacted, the brain is injured to a degree. Gray matter can be lost in the brain, right? And so just like another injury, like we might experience, let's say a broken leg, it's going to be a process where we may have to have a really structured plan around physical therapy. Engaging in that therapy might feel worse before it starts to feel better. And you really have to trust that physical therapist to let you know, okay, now I need you to push harder, or nope, not yet. It's not time, because if we're moving too quickly or we're not engaging in the treatment that's going to support you in healing, you could get re-injured, right? And complicate your recovery process. So just like engaging in physical therapy, it may not be normal. You may not be doing what you've typically done, but it's not forever. And there is a really critical time period where the focus of nutrition rehabilitation has to happen, for an individual to be in the position to really reach full recovery.
Yeah, absolutely. And so we're both here to say that if you're listening today and you are a mom or a dad or a wife or husband supporting your loved one in recovery, and you've had the thought like, oh my goodness, does my child really need this much? That's a pretty normative response. And, understanding, like Katherine said, that this is an injury and there are a lot of influences, like we talked about earlier in the show, around diet culture and all these messages that we get about what our bodies need. And so working with a trained professional, versus Googling a meal plan, in my opinion, is the way to go.
Yeah, whenever possible. Yeah, whenever that's accessible to an individual. Because, to your point, Laura, going through this nutrition rehabilitation process, this is not normal eating, right? This may not be the way a person's ever eaten before, or it may not be how their peers are eating, their coworkers, their families, their friends. It initially, almost always, is a pretty prescriptive process. And I've found really necessary to allow the body to regulate, for gastric function to regulate, gastric emptying, appetite hormones, hunger and fullness cues to return, metabolism to normalize. and having a guide or a plan, so to speak, that an individual can follow, that their family's informed about, that they can support around, is going to put them in the position to then be able to move into more normative eating or attuned eating or intuitive eating. But at first, it's not going to feel normal, may feel very wrong, and you're going against your body. So having the support of a specialized trained dietitian or clinician to help guide you through that process can just really be pivotal. And it can save a lot of time, right? So I think going back to that analogy about the major broken leg, right? This isn't something like, oh, we got a broken leg, so we're just going to kind of let it sit for a while, and maybe in 6 months we'll think about treating this. Especially for individuals that are younger, when their brain is still developing and there's pruning going on, it's really critical. We want to act. And we know from the research we have earlier intervention, and again, rescuing that brain and optimizing a person's nutritional status leads to, higher recovery rates.
Yeah, absolutely. And there's an urgency. And for lack of a better word right now, it's not coming to me. I know it's early in the morning, but, an aggressive, not aggressive approach, but a timely approach. That's the word I'm looking for, right? There's an urgency to treating an eating disorder with the end in sight, right? That, okay, what we're doing right now is very purposeful, right? And it's very intentional. And so it's a little bit different even than how I was trained in graduate school, right? And some of the supervision I've gotten is, hey, we really need to work on getting this person fed. And if you think about Maslow's hierarchy of needs, for those of y'all that are listening, you can Google this and it comes right up. But yeah, Maslow's hierarchy of needs, like food, shelter, safety, right? Those are some of the things at the very bottom. And if the bottom falls out, well, then we can't even try to meet the rest of our needs of connection, love, belonging, all the other things. And so when I started to understand that as a younger therapist, that really clicked with me of like, yeah, there is an urgency, especially really for any eating disorder, but the earlier we catch it, hopefully we reduce long-term pain and suffering, right? Because as you and I know, it doesn't just go away, right? Just like a leg that's broken, unless it gets appropriate medical treatment, it doesn't just go away without professional intervention. And so, we're here to say that, you can heal later in life, and your brain has had longer in it. And so it's going to take more time to rewire what we call those neural pathways. And so that's why we approach it urgently, is because we really want to reduce long-term suffering.
Yeah. And eating disorders are disruptive. They're isolating, right? They're life-threatening. And, I think a goal that I have with any individual I'm working with or any family is supporting that individual and being able to live a life that aligns with their values, right? And ultimately, eating disorders compromise that at a point.
Absolutely. It's life, what we call in therapy, like life interfering, right? Because if you think about food, I mean, whether we're going to potluck or, eating at a church gathering or going out to eat with colleagues at work, it's so life interfering. And so that's why, we treat it so urgently, is we really want to help support people, like you said, getting to a place of full recovery where they can live a life that's in line with their values. Yeah.
Treating urgently, and also I think comprehensively, right? Like going back to that treatment team approach, that multidisciplinary approach. I recognize as a dietitian, partnering with individuals and collaborating with them on their nutrition rehabilitation plan and their recovery plan, they're going to have a lot of big emotions, right? They're going to be activated. They're going to have a lot of distress. And that's where having a really skilled, trained therapist to be a part of that, it's just so essential, right? Like this isn't something that I feel like I can really do alone, right? And not only that, going through that process, again, really any nutritional status, there can be medical things that come up that either just need to be monitored regularly so we can ensure that how the body's responding to this process is going to be health promoting for that individual and there's not anything that we're missing. So yes, we want to treat urgently and we want to make sure that we're covering, all the bases, or thinking about a stool that has 3 legs. If one of those legs is gone, that stool might topple over, right? So understanding the nutritional, medical, like physiologic aspect of the recovery process and having that support in place, along with the emotional, like therapeutic aspect.
I love that. I love that word you use, comprehensive. That just feels so just accurate, right? Of a picture of what quality eating disorder treatment is about, right? Because that's what we're going for, is the quality piece and the long-term hope of full recovery. I'm curious, I get asked quite frequently from family members, like, hey, what can I be doing? Like, because there is this urgency, I think, from them as well. They want to understand. And so one thing that I share with families is kind of this idea of doing your own work. So really challenging them to come to sessions, if they have the opportunity to do that. And I understand with families, sometimes it can be tricky because both parents are working and they've got to take time off work. But doing your own work around your ability to tolerate emotions will not only be helpful for you as a parent or loved one, but also for your child or loved one, right? And so that's one of the recommendations that I give quite frequently to families is, hey, if it's available to you, I would recommend having your own therapist or doing some of your own emotional work so that you can better tolerate your loved one's emotions, right? Because like you said, when we reduce eating disorder behaviors, what we typically see is more of an emotional response, because that's the whole purpose of the eating disorder, is to dampen or to avoid the emotions. And so supporting your loved one as they start to feel more of their feelings is crucial. So that's one of the pieces as a therapist that I think is just really, really important. I don't know, as a dietitian, what stands out to you in terms of maybe some of the best wisdom or best nuggets that you've shared over the years that you've found to just be really helpful for families?
Yeah, gosh, so many, Laura. And I think that the first thing that pops into my mind is there are some really great resources out there as far as books go and workbooks and podcasts, like this one. And I think as much as possible as support people can really immerse themselves in learning, even reading the same books or resources that their loved one might be encouraged to read can be really helpful to just understand what their loved one is going through. And again, how they can be the most supportive.
Absolutely. Yeah. What would you say? So, on this podcast, we're talking about just like the highs and lows of life, right? And so I know we've talked about some heavy things today. I'm just curious, what do you find is the hardest part of this work?
Ooh, that's a good question. And I may have to think on that, for a minute, because again, it's individualized, right? And I think for some people, one aspect may be the most challenging, where for another individual, it may be something completely different. But I think, as a clinician, what I'll speak to, I think one of the most challenging aspects of this work is just the collaboration process and ensuring that, my client that, I'm hired to support and that, I care for, where we're getting everybody on the same page that's on their treatment team. And we're working together, collectively to just support that individual's treatment plan. Yeah. So to that end, I think sometimes that can be a challenge for an individual, like embarking on this process. It's like, okay, either myself, I think I'm dealing with an eating disorder, or my loved one or my child is dealing with an eating disorder. Oh my goodness, what's next? What do I do now? And really enlisting that support team ensuring you're able to find practitioners that are the best fit, that have the experience and the expertise that you're looking for, and getting that in place, I think, can be really intimidating and just challenging for a person that has, again, they've never done this before.
Sure. Yeah, I think that resonates with me, and that feels true for me too. I've shared on this podcast, so I'm fully recovered from an eating disorder, and I had the opportunity just to work with an incredible team, and I will always be grateful for them. And I think one of the hardest parts for me is just the devastation that, when you have a family come in, or, that they bring into the room, can just be really, really tough. And that feeling of just being utterly discouraged, that's one of the hardest parts for me. And of course, as someone who has made it to the other side, I quite frequently think like, no, there is another way. And I want you to know this. And I want to give you that hope. And sitting with people in that pain can just be really tough. And I'm a trained clinician, right? So I do it all day, every day. And sitting with that pain can just be really hard. But I'm curious, Katherine, what is your favorite part of working with families?
Oh gosh. So many things, Laura, so many things. I find it to be just really, really rewarding to collaborate with a family. And, that's that word collaboration, that's how I practice, right? Where everybody is actively involved, right, in their nutrition therapy and what that looks like. And we're really going through that process together to determine recovery goals and treatment goals. So I think having the opportunity to spend a lot of time with these individuals on a consistent, regular basis and see the recovery happen, right? And be able to talk with, a client, an individual, or their family and say, hey, remember a few months ago when you said this is something that you felt like would never be possible for you, or that you didn't feel like you could do? And here we are talking about it. So having that hope that we as clinicians hold out for recovery for our clients when maybe they're not feeling it or they're not seeing it, and then it coming to fruition is a beautiful thing. And to see individuals be able to actively engage in their life, again, aligning with their values, is just incredible to witness. And it really is a gift. And I feel so grateful to have the opportunity to be a part of that process.
Sure. Yeah, it's almost like you can kind of see the light come back in their eyes, right? Like whether it's the client or the family member. And like you said, it's like recovery happening right in front of you. And I mean, it's just such a gift, right, as clinicians. And yeah, I mean, when you get to see someone in the throes of an eating disorder walk through recovery and hopefully get to the point of full recovery, I mean, wow, it's truly miraculous, right? And it's not because of necessarily something I've done or you've done, but it's really a team effort, and the client is the one working hard. And it's so sweet. It's such a gift to watch. And really the hope, I think, too, of family members or parents that I've worked with that they get to experience again. It's just such a sweet thing.
Yeah, to hear from those family members, like, oh my gosh, like I feel like my wife's back, or like my son, like he's back to himself again. And then for the client to say that themselves too, like, wow, I'm really seeing like a shift in how I'm just navigating through my day and how I'm feeling and how I'm thinking. And I feel so much better.
Well, thank you so much for just sharing a small portion of your expertise. Real quick, we're going to close out with an affirmation and some homework. So this affirmation really is for family members. So I would just love for y'all to chew on this idea that I am capable of providing compassionate support to my loved ones suffering, because you're not alone in this. There are a lot of people going through what you're going through, supporting loved ones in eating disorder recovery. But like Katherine said earlier in the show, it can be so isolating. right? And I know it can be tempting to throw in the towel, but you are supporting a loved one, and for that you are a saint. And I want to really say that those people that are out there supporting loved ones in eating disorder recovery are doing the good work. And then for homework, I want you to think about what has been helpful and what has maybe been unhelpful for your loved one in eating disorder recovery. So in the therapy room, I really challenge clients to take responsibility and ownership. So if you have messed up, that's okay. What we can do is we can ask for forgiveness and we can repair our ruptures. And so your homework is maybe to think for yourself about what you think has been helpful for your loved one in recovery and maybe what's been unhelpful. And then if there's time, if you have the capacity, if you feel safe to ask your loved one, ask them, right? So like Katherine said, I think a lot of people are afraid of saying the wrong thing, and so they just choose to say nothing at all. But maybe ask your loved ones today, hey, what am I doing or what am I not doing that you feel is supportive to you in your eating disorder recovery process? And so asking and practicing curiosity in that way can be really helpful. So Katherine, I want to share a little bit about your practice and how people can find you. So I know you gave me that information, but www.fowlernutrition.com. And you've got two ladies working with you, so Anna and Ellie, and all three of y'all are just fantastic and amazing. And so, Katherine, are you guys taking new clients?
Yes, we are taking new clients and would welcome the opportunity to, support individuals or families in their eating disorder recovery process. We're in Nashville, Tennessee, as Laura mentioned, in the Green Hills area, and we offer in-person and virtual services for Tennessee residents when it's clinically appropriate. So, yes, we would very much welcome the opportunity to collaborate with any individuals that might benefit from our services.
And I know you guys also, y'all see really, what's the youngest age you work with all the way up through the lifespan, right?
Well, depending on the provider, we're able to serve all ages throughout the lifespan.
Amazing. And I have personally worked with Katherine along with her two lovely team members, and I just cannot say enough amazing things about them. And I've learned, I feel like I've become a better therapist, and I've told you this before, but working with you all. And so I just feel so grateful that y'all are in Nashville and that we can refer back and forth. And I would just highly recommend your practice to really anyone looking for nutrition therapy. And so thank you for being on the show.
Likewise, working with you and your team is always, such a gift, and we're grateful to have your services and your practice as a resource for our clients that are in need of a therapist. So thank you.
Thank you. Well, thanks, y'all, and we will see you next time. Bye.
Bye.